For all its beauty and splendor, the sea can be a cruel teacher. The ocean will give you joy like nothing else. The smell of salt, the sting of spray, the sun on your face and the long horizon ahead. You feel small, but you feel alive. It is you and the water and the sky. But the sea is never yours. It will turn on you without warning. The wind shifts, the sky darkens. Waves rise where there was calm. One moment you are laughing, the next you are fighting for your life. Let's venture back to the unforgiving ocean where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For the tourist aboard the Sea Dragon 2, their sea excursion would be a nightmare. Anna Blight had come to Bali to celebrate life. The 39-year-old Melbourne accountant had just marked her birthday and was treating herself to a tropical getaway. A well-earned break from her successful but demanding career. She traveled with a close friend, Lisa Abel, eager to experience Bali's warm beaches and vibrant marine life. On the morning of March 21, 2025, Anna and 10 other tourists climbed aboard a sleek white snorkeling boat called the Sea Dragon 2 for what was meant to be the highlight of their holiday. A day trip to swim with reef manta rays off Nusa Penida Island. The sky was clear and bright, and the small group, hailing from Australia and across the world, buzzed with excitement for the adventure ahead. Among the passengers were Gabe Heiniakoff and Kintamani Tam Warrington, a young couple from Brisbane, on what their family described as a much-needed vacation. After years of hard work, this trip to Bali was their chance to relax together. Also aboard was a family from Estonia, Lisa and Andreas Abel and their 7-year-old daughter Alexandra, who had journeyed all the way from Northern Europe to Bali as a birthday treat for their little girl. The Abels had carefully researched tour companies and believed they'd chosen one of the safest operators for their snorkeling outing. Rounding out the group was Eva Jongbloed, a Dutch traveler in her 20s, seeking her own slice of paradise in Bali, along with a few other tourists and 2 Indonesian crew members. In total, 13 people were on the boat that day. As the Sea Dragon 2 sped out from Sanur Harbor, the mood was buoyant. The morning sun sparkled off turquoise water, and the famous cliffs of Nusa Penida loomed in the distance. Passengers chatted about the manta rays they hoped to see at the dive spot called Manta Point. Anna, an avid traveler and longtime ocean lover, was all smiles. To her cousin Lisa, who watched from a seat beside her, it was heartwarming to see Anna so happy and carefree on this birthday trip. Little Alexandra Abel was practically bouncing. This was her special day after all, and her parents kept their camera ready to capture memories of their daughter's first snorkeling experience in Bali's crystal clear waters. Yet, amid the excitement, one detail nagged at Lisa Abel's mind. Before departure, she noticed the crew had given no safety briefing. More concerning, no one had distributed life jackets or explained emergency procedures. Lisa, a cautious mother, grew uneasy. She politely asked a crew member for life jackets, not once, but repeatedly, 5 times in total. Each time she was brushed off or told that they were not needed. The boat was supposedly well equipped with life vests somewhere on board, but none were being handed out nonetheless. As Sea Dragon 2 motored farther from shore, Lisa's anxiety mounted. Finally, spotting a tiny child-sized pink life jacket tucked amid some gear, she made a snap decision. She plucked the little vest from the pile, slipped it over Alexandra's small shoulders, and tightened the straps. "Please keep this on," she urged her daughter. It was an impulsive act of maternal instinct that would later prove to be invaluable. For the first half of the journey, the Sea Dragon 2 sliced smoothly through gentle swells. But as the boat neared Nusa Penida's southern coast, the weather suddenly began to turn. Dark clouds materialized on the horizon ahead. The wind picked up, flicking sea spray at the passengers. Gabe Heiniakoff and Tam Warrington exchanged a concerned glance as the once calm sea started heaving. They had traveled in boats before, but the swells rising in front of them were becoming alarming. Within minutes, what had been a pleasure cruise transformed into a punishing ride. The sky over Manta Point blackened with storm clouds so intense that several other tour boats aborted their trips and turned back to Bali. The Sea Dragon, too, did not turn back. Despite the deteriorating conditions, the captain pressed onward toward Nusa Penida's dive sites. Passengers braced themselves as the small vessel climbed up towering waves and slammed down the other side. Each hit sent shudders through the hull. The captain was racing the boat forward at high speed and at times taking the waves side on instead of head first. With every broadside hit, the Sea Dragon too rocked precariously. Saltwater spray lashed the faces of those on board. A couple of tourists, now pale and wide-eyed, gripped their seats in fear. Lisa Abel clutched little Alexandra tightly, fighting back panic and trying to reassure her terrified child even as her own heart pounded. Far ahead, another dark swell rises from the depths, higher, steeper, and angrier than the rest, waiting for its moment to strike. And when it does, this carefree trip would turn into a catastrophe. As the boat darts towards their destination, the sky darkens and the sea heaves, each swell rising higher. The bow of the Sea Dragon too vanishes behind towering walls of water. "Oh God, this is not good," one tourist says. Their words were swallowed by the wind and spray. Suddenly, a foaming gray wave slams directly into the side of the vessel. A gush of water surges over the stern, crashing into the passengers at the rear and inundating the boat. Screams and shouts erupt. In an instant, the deck of Sea Dragon 2 is awash and the boat begins to tip. From her seat near the back, Anna Blight felt the cold shock of water as the wave broke over them. Instinctively, she tried to hold on, but the force was irresistible. A large wave hit with such impact that Anna was thrown overboard into the churning sea. One moment she was beside Tam Warrington, and the next she was gone beneath the frothing water. Tam could only watch in horror as her friend disappeared. Before anyone could react, a second enormous wave struck. The twin impact proved too much for the Sea Dragon 2. Around 8:30 a.m., the boat flipped violently and capsized off Bali's Kelingking Beach, dumping everyone into the sea. The small craft that had been their trusted transport was now belly up, its hull pointing at the stormy sky. Underneath that overturned hull, in an air pocket rapidly shrinking, several passengers found themselves trapped in darkness. For those caught underneath the capsized boat, panic set in immediately. Gabe Heiniakoff was plunged into an underwater world of confusion. One moment he was on deck, the next he was tossed into the ocean, entombed under the boat's hull. "You don't know what's up or down. You're just scrambling to get breath," he said. Disoriented in the murky water, Gabe fought to find an exit to open sea or air. Tam Warrington was nearby under the hull, also desperate for oxygen, feeling helpless as she flailed in the darkness, lungs burning. "It was absolutely terrifying. I really did think we were going to die," Tam said. Lisa Abel had also been dragged under, along with little Alexandra. In that black underwater void, Lisa's only thought was for her daughter. By some miracle, Alexandra was still beside her, the child's bright pink life jacket visible even in the gloom. Lisa gripped her daughter's arm and kicked furiously, trying to find a way out before they both drowned. Somehow, amid the tangle of bodies and debris underwater and the 5-meter or 16-foot waves, they found a gap and burst out to the surface on the other side of the overturned boat. Gasping for air, survivors began popping up around the hull, one by one. They clung to the slick sides of the capsized Sea Dragon 2 for flotation. Within a minute or two, a small cluster of dazed, coughing people had assembled atop or around the upturned boat. Gabe and Tam managed to escape from under the hull and join the others in open water. Waterlogged and wide-eyed, they clambered onto the bottom of the boat, now serving as a life raft. It was only then, in that first head count of the living, that someone shouted over the wind, "Where's Anna?" A quick scan of the group confirmed the fear. Anna Blight was missing. She had not surfaced. Tam's heart sank. She thought of the last glimpse she'd had of Anna, her friend's face etched with fear as she was swept away. Tam and Gabe shouted her name into the storm but saw nothing. For little Alexandra, the nightmare was almost too much to comprehend. She had been stuck under the boat briefly, her small life jacket keeping her afloat until Lisa pulled her out. Alexandra coughed up seawater, her body shaking. She was in shock, hypothermic, and struggling to breathe. Within minutes, she was vomiting salt water mixed with blood and turning blue from lack of oxygen. Lisa clutched her daughter atop the hull, stroking her soaked hair and praying for help. Around them, the sea was chaos. Several passengers were injured in the capsize. Many had come into contact with spilled engine fuel or battery acid, sustaining painful chemical burns. Tam's injuries were especially severe. Toxic fluids in the water had soaked into her clothing and skin, causing extensive burns over much of her body. Gabe, too, was burned and battered, with numerous cuts streaking his body. But in that moment, adrenaline and fear kept everyone focused on survival. Rain began to fall from the dark Indonesian sky, and the overturned boat heaved in, the swell like a cork. The survivors huddled on the hull or bobbed in life rings they had managed to grab. Each minute that passed felt like an eternity. At last, after more than an hour of drifting in the open ocean, battered by wind and rain, salvation appears as a faint shape on the horizon. At first, the survivors can't tell if it's real. The haze of seawater in their eyes makes everything blur, and the constant rise and fall of the swell hides it from view. Then, through the spray, a hull breaks the line of the waves, a passing tourist vessel, its bow cutting toward them. The reaction to the overturned Sea Dragon 2 is almost primal. People scream, wave their arms, and splash frantically, each desperate to be seen. A flare would have done it in seconds, but the boat's emergency gear is either trapped under the hull or washed away. Their only signal now is human noise and the bright orange of a single life ring bobbing in the water. The rescue boat draws closer, its crew pointing and shouting over the thrum of the engines. It's not an easy approach. The seas are still running high, and pulling alongside the capsized hull without crushing someone is a delicate dance. When the moment comes, survivors are pulled aboard in a rough but urgent rhythm, arms locking around torsos, hands gripping wrists slick with seawater. Some collapse the instant they're on deck. Lisa Abel passes Alexandra up first. The little girl is limp, her eyes half closed, lips pale from cold. "Take her!" Lisa shouts over the wind, her voice cracking with fear. As Alexandra is whisked away to safety, Lisa scrambles up after her, knees bruising against the metal as she climbs. Gabe refuses to board until Tam is lifted up. She can barely move, her legs a patchwork of raw, burned skin that screams with each touch. Two rescuers haul her in, careful not to jolt her, but the motion wrings a stifled cry from her lips. Gabe follows, clutching the side until his feet hit the unfamiliar deck. With 12 survivors now aboard, the rescuers turn back for the last missing passenger. Anna is found beneath the overturned hull, her body caught where the air pocket has collapsed. She is lifted with the same care, wrapped quickly in a tarp. The deck goes quiet except for the sound of the engines and the hiss of the waves. The rescue boat heads for the nearest possible landing, Kelling King Beach, a narrow slash of sand framed by towering limestone cliffs that plunge straight into the sea. From the water, the place looks otherworldly. Steep green slopes, jagged rock, and no sign of a road or dock. The survivors, still shivering and half in shock, can already tell this is not going to be a simple landing. When they reach the beach, locals rush to help, their shouts echoing against the cliffs. There is no pier, no lifeguard station, just a few fishing boats pulled up on the sand and the skeletal frame of a construction crane perched far above. The cliff face looms nearly 400 meters, a sheer wall between them and the island's meager road network. The rescuers and locals confer rapidly in Indonesian. Minutes later, the plan becomes clear. The crane, meant for hauling building materials, will be their only ticket up. A rusting metal basket, barely large enough for 4 or 5 people, dangles from the end of the cable. The first group steps in, gripping the sides as the crane jerks upward. The basket swings, scraping rock in places, rising at a sickening angle. From below, those waiting can hear nervous laughter mixed with gasps. When it's Lisa and Alexandra's turn, Lisa hesitates, looking up at the dizzying height, but there's no choice. She steps in with her daughter, pulling her close. Alexandra buries her face in her mother's soaked shirt, refusing to look down. The ride is slow, and every sway of the basket sends their stomachs flipping. The cliff wall slides past in jagged detail, moss, lichen, and sharp outcroppings, just inches away. On the beach, Gabe helps ease Tam into the basket. She grips the metal frame so hard her knuckles go white, each movement of the crane sending pain lancing up her legs. Gabe climbs in beside her, bracing himself to shield her from the swinging. They ascend in silence, the wind whistling through the frame, the ocean shrinking below. At the top, there's no triumphant reception, no ambulance, no stretchers, no medical tent. Just a scattering of villagers, tourists, and a few uniformed police, all watching the wounded emerge from the sky. The survivors are laid on the ground, wrapped in blankets. For the injured, the climb has drained the last of their strength. Hours pass on the cliffside. Salt water dries in white streaks on their skin, lips crack from dehydration, and the burns on Tam's legs and torso worsen with every minute. Gabe paces in frustration. Lisa holds Alexandra in her lap, rocking her gently. Anna's body lies apart, covered and still, waiting to be taken down the winding roads to the island's port. By the time vehicles arrive to take them to the harbor, the sun is already dipping westward. They are ferried back to Bali in the fading light, the shoreline, a black silhouette against a crimson sky. The journey to the hospital is slow, delayed further by traffic in Denpasar. It isn't until night has fully fallen that the survivors reach the sterile lights and antiseptic air of Sangla Hospital. The chaos of the rescue is finally over. For Gabe and Tam, the delay was costly. By the time doctors saw them, infection was setting in. Tam was moved to intensive care, unable to speak due to pain. Gabe's injuries were also severe. Nearly 24 hours passed before certain life-saving interventions were made. When news of the Sea Dragon 2 disaster reaches Australia, it lands with the kind of shock that freezes people in place. In Melbourne, the phones at Anna Blight's workplace light up before sunrise. Colleagues stare at the early news reports in disbelief. This is Anna, the woman who never missed a project deadline, who was always the first to volunteer for charity events, and who sent handwritten thank you notes to her clients. Her family's grief is immediate and unrelenting. Anna's parents are told first, the words coming haltingly from an official voice on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry to inform you." They sit together in stunned silence afterward, staring at nothing. The Bali holiday brochure she'd shown them months earlier, still on the kitchen counter. Her siblings call each other through tears. They are haunted by the fact that she had just celebrated her birthday 2 days before. While Anna's family begins the painful process of repatriating her body, the other survivors fight their own battles, in hospital beds and recovery wards across Bali, and later back home. Tam Warrington's injuries are among the most severe. When the boat flipped, she had been thrown against metal and fiberglass, cutting her arms and back. But the worst damage came in the water. As she struggled free of the overturned hull, she swam straight through a cloud of leaking fuel and battery acid. The corrosive mix soaked into her clothes and onto her skin. By the time she was pulled from the ocean, angry red burns were already forming across her thighs, hips, and lower torso. Hours without proper treatment allowed the burns to deepen. In the days that followed, patches of her skin blistered and sloughed away. Every movement was agony. The simple act of shifting in bed left her shaking. Gabe Heiniakoff was burned too, deep chemical burns along one arm and hip, and had multiple cuts from being flung against the hull. The salt water kept them from clotting. Like Tam, he also inhaled fuel-tainted water during the capsize, leaving him coughing for weeks. Still, his injuries were less severe, and he used what strength he had to advocate for Tam's care, often arguing with hospital staff when delays arose. The Abel family's physical injuries were milder, but no less significant to them. Lisa had bruises on her ribs from holding Alexandra tight during the waves and from the crane ride up Kaling King's cliffs. Her shoulders ached from gripping her daughter in the water. Alexandra herself was left with a hacking cough and inflamed lungs from seawater aspiration. Doctors warned that her breathing might sound rough for weeks. For a child who had just turned 7, the hospital environment was terrifying. She refused to let go of her mother's hand, even while sleeping. Other survivors nursed their own wounds, sprained wrists from clinging to the boat, gashed shins from being tossed against metal fittings, and sunburn from the long, exposed weight on the overturned hull. More than one had the raw, peeling skin that comes from prolonged contact with gasoline-soaked water. The physical pain was matched, if not outweighed, by the mental strain. Many woke in the night gasping, convinced they were still trapped beneath the hull. As the injured stabilized, the questions began to mount. In the hospital, survivors compared stories. Indonesian police opened an investigation, interviewing the surviving crew first. The captain claimed he had slowed when the seas grew rough and that the accident was unavoidable after the boat hit a floating log. Survivors disputed parts of his account. He wasn't slowing down enough, Gabe told investigators, recalling how the vessel still took waves broadside. Others pointed out that several nearby tour boats had turned back entirely, something the Sea Dragon 2 did not do. The lack of life jackets became a central sticking point. The crew insisted they had given a safety briefing and that jackets were available on board. Survivors countered that no briefing had occurred and that, if jackets were there, they weren't accessible when the waves came. Lisa's persistence in finding one for Alexandra may well have been the only reason her daughter survived. Meanwhile, back in Australia, public opinion began to turn. Media coverage highlighted the survivors' accounts of poor safety standards and slow emergency response. Travel safety experts were invited on air to warn tourists about maritime risks in Indonesia. When the police report was finally released months later, its conclusion was clear: natural causes, no negligence. For the survivors, it felt like a door slammed shut. One life gone, many others changed forever, and no accountability. Some suspected tourism's importance to the Balinese economy had muted the appetite for blame. Anna's family received the news with quiet anger. In their eyes, their daughter's death wasn't an act of nature. It was the product of human decisions. Decisions to keep going when the sea turned, to skip handing out life jackets, to prioritize the day's itinerary over the passengers' safety. But those were conclusions they would have to carry privately, because the official record told a different story. The tragedy sparked calls for safer tourism. Bali's tourism board promised stricter safety audits and certification for tour operators. The Abel family urged travelers to ask about safety procedures and life jackets before boarding any vessel. Back in Brisbane, Gabe and Tam faced a long road to recovery. Tam endured multiple surgeries for her burns. Both spoke publicly about the need for better emergency response in Bali, horrified that their treatment only began a day after the accident. The Abel family returned to Estonia, but the events stayed with them. Alexandra, now 8, is learning to swim again to overcome her fear. Sometimes at night she asks her mother why the nice lady had to die. Lisa holds her close, telling her it wasn't her fault. Anna's family and friends work to keep her memory alive. At her memorial, colleagues spoke of her mentorship and generosity. Her parents recalled her adventurous spirit. The Sea Dragon 2 tragedy is a cautionary tale about the thin line between joy and sorrow, risk and safety. It began as 11 tourists setting out for a day of fun and ended with one family bereaved and many others forever changed. It's a story of grief, survival, heroism, and hard-earned wisdom. The survivors remain bonded by the shared trauma and by their vow that the lessons of March 21, 2025 won't be forgotten. One moment you are laughing in the surf, the next you are fighting for air, pulled down into a darkness that doesn't let go. The horizon you admired a heartbeat ago becomes a wall of water. The sand under your feet turns to nothing, and your lungs burn as panic takes hold. And then, tragedy. The sea is vast, merciless, and indifferent. Those who respect it may live to tell its stories, those who do not become part of them. Out there, you must be ready to turn back, to respect the change in the wind, to admit the sea has the last word. It will give you days you will remember until you are old, but it will take you just as quickly. If your boat capsizes in a storm, survival depends on staying calm, conserving energy, and making smart, immediate decisions. First, take a deep breath before the roll if you can. Protect your head, and try to avoid getting tangled in lines or gear as the boat goes over. Once in the water, orient yourself quickly. Figure out where the surface is, and if you're under the hull, look for light or air pockets, but get clear of the boat if it's sinking or being tossed violently. If life jackets are accessible, put one on immediately, even if you consider yourself a strong swimmer. In cold, rough, or fuel-contaminated water, your swimming ability will degrade fast. Stay with the overturned hull or other large floating debris if possible. It's easier for rescuers to spot a group or a vessel than an individual head in the waves. Conserve heat by keeping as much of your body out of the water as possible, huddling with others, and avoiding unnecessary movement. Avoid drinking seawater, and if you've ingested fuel or oil, spit it out and rinse your mouth with fresh water if you have any. Signal for help whenever you see a possible rescuer using reflective surfaces, bright clothing, or waving arms. But don't waste energy screaming continuously. Above all, focus on staying visible, staying afloat, and staying together until rescue arrives to get through. An outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.